Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us in this podcast series called the African Catalyst Podcast Series. In this episode, we have a topic called the energy transition implication for Nigerian natural resource. My name is Femi Awufala. I'll be your host for this podcast recording, and I will be joined by two of my great facilitators, Mr. Bayode Akomolafe and Dr. Ayodele Oni. But before we start, I would like to run you through some few slides to give you a background of what we'll be covering today. So today I will introduce you to the African Catalyst, what the African Catalyst is all about, and we have an upcoming event called the Africa Infrapreneurs Program, which I will also tell you a bit about. Then we'll go into the topic of the discussion of the day, which is energy transition implications for natural resources, and we'll also go into a bit of Q&A, and we'll now end the podcast in itself. Now, let me move on in great detail. Now, the Africa Infrapreneurs Program is a program that is designed by the African Catalyst, which is basically an entrepreneurial finance training that is designed for entrepreneurs involved in projects within the energy and infrastructure space. And we see this gap as an important gap to equip and help to grow African entrepreneurs in Africa and in other regions within the African space in itself. Who can participate? We believe this program can allow individuals to participate who are basically startups involved in large-scale PPP infrastructure projects, family enterprises, and also public sector. The program is going to be for 6 days or 5 days, and we're going to be involved in discussing various aspects of project bankability, climate adaptation, contract mechanics, and helping entrepreneurs to put a deep sense of knowledge in their project development. Now to the topic of today. We are looking at the implications of energy transition in Nigeria's natural resource rich enterprise. Now, we know that a number of government actions have been led towards us having what we call the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan, which is a major aim to achieve net zero by 2060. And secondly is the fact that this transition plan focuses on four main areas: industrial usage of gas, transportation, energy generation using gas, heating using gas. And in this regard, the Nigerian government has signed climate deals or climate accords with different forms of organizations and different forms of climate institutions, like the Paris Agreement, to reduce green gas emissions in its environment and in its country. Hence, we see a big need for the fact that, where is the conflict now? Nigeria has huge amount of natural resources. For you to excavate these natural resources and process them and make them work for you, you will need to run processes that will create pollution in the environment and would reduce your objective of meeting your energy transition plan as you've signed with different organizations. So what we are seeing here is the fact that we want to now discuss here what are the issues and what are the various interpretations of the sector today as natural resources as we see it in Nigeria. And I'm joined by Dr. Ayodele Oni, who I will allow to take the floor and introduce himself, his firm, what they do, and we will now go on to Mr. Bayode Akomolafe to also give us how do you see the natural resource sector today in Nigeria, what are the pain points and what are the key discussion things that you think we should look out for. Thank you, Mr. Ayodele Oni. Over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Ayodele Oni. I'm a partner at the law firm Bloomfield Law Practice. I'm the chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Practice Group. I do infrastructure work, I do energy, I do transactional work, I do policy advisory. Generally speaking, I do a lot of restructuring. I do work for the NNPC and some of the subsidiaries. I do work for private enterprises, business people, particularly in the energy sector. I do oil, gas, electricity. I also do some mining and, of course, quite a bit of renewables more recently. That's what I do. My firm is a full service firm. We have different teams doing corporate securities and finance, doing energy, doing dispute resolution, doing capital markets, and shipping and aviation, and also corporate immigration. That's primarily what the firm does.
Great. So, can you tell us, maybe over to Mr. Bayode Oni, Mr. Bayode Akomolafe, to just introduce himself too. Thank you, sir.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bayode Akomolafe. I work for a field corps as a global program manager. Field corps is a fully owned company of the General Electric Company. We are mainly involved in power generation, asset services management globally. Field corps is fully owned again by GE. We provide services only to General Electric, and as I said, it's fully owned by General Electric. Yeah, and personally, I aside from that, I call myself an independent energy system analyst. I call it a macro energy system analyst. Basically, what that means is looking at the social, economic, and environmental aspect of energy system, and as well as the technical aspect, to see how they all come together to serve the populace in a sustainable and economical way. That's basically about me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Bayode. So now we go to the basic discussion of today. So to Mr. Oni, Dr. Oni, have you seen the current state of the natural resource sector in Nigeria? So talking about the oil itself, gas, and mining, and the activities of the natural resources. Before we go into what exactly the energy transition is, we just want to just use that as an entry level overview of what you think the sector is doing, and how attractive do you think it is as we speak today?
Okay, thank you very much. Very good question. First is that we need to put them in buckets, generally speaking. For a long time, there was a lot of emphasis on crude oil with very little emphasis on gas, natural gas. That's why, for example, the Petroleum Act doesn't have provisions or never had provisions for gas. And government had to make rules, regulations specific to gas and domestic gas in particular. So it was crude, very little gas. Mining too was abandoned once crude oil was found, because people would say prior to the discovery of crude oil in commercial quantities, we did a lot of mining and we made a lot of money, income, GDP. A large part of a reasonable part of our GDP was from mining, but recently it's not been that good. So but with the passage of the Petroleum Industry Act, and when you even speak about oil itself, we had a lot of problems around oil theft, issues around pricing. In the downstream segment, you had issues around subsidy and not removing subsidy, which meant that many people didn't want to invest because of the challenges around sourcing funds, waiting to be paid that subsidy amount. So those challenges were problems for our midstream segment. And remember that it's a value chain, and a value chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So the downstream segment was weak. There was very little emphasis itself on the midstream, liquefaction, processing, all of that for gas and even for crude refining. We always sold our crude abroad and then imported finished products, and which was a problem, was adversely impacting our balance of trade and balance of payment. So from a resource point of view, we're resource rich, But if you don't add value to your resources, you would end up exporting and paying more to bring in finished products. So you can be resource rich and be energy poor. And recall, there's a direct correlation between energy access and utilization and poverty. So once you are energy poor in terms of utilization and excess, it translates to actual poverty. So that's what we've suffered in this country, particularly from a crude oil point of view. From a gas point of view, the commercial arrangement for gas was poor. There was very little utilization. People were forced, gas producers were forced to sell gas to what used to be NEPA, National Electric Power Authority, which became power company, for less than the cost of production. So no one was going to invest in such a thing where you were selling your good services or your product for less than the cost of production. So that in itself was a problem. You had power being the major user of gas, and then you had that user wanting to pay less than the cost of production. So people didn't invest. Many of the projects you did see in the 90s, mid-late 90s, early 2000s were export projects. No one was doing local utilization because the commercial arrangement didn't make sense. Utilization was poor. We didn't have a lot of gas-based industries until very recently. So that's been the story. Poverty in the midst of plenty, because we did not add sufficient value. We did not work well on the commercial arrangement. But with the PIA, things seem to be looking up. The devil is in the implementation, because the average businessman who wants to invest risk capital looks at three things. Do you have sufficient resources? Can I monetize? And can I enforce my contracts such that when there's a breach, I can enforce my contract, international arbitration or elsewhere? So those are the three things. Monetization, do you have enough? Can I enforce my contracts? So, and in enforcing contracts, they want to see certainty. You want to see certainty. So we had that issue with the PIA, PIB for almost 20 years. Oh, we're going to change the law. We ain't sure. We ain't going to change the law. It was going to be done in piecemeal. It was going to be done at a whole. So no one was investing new capital in exploration. And that's why we've had some of the challenges we've had meeting our OPEC quota. It's for energy projects, they have long lead times. So if you miss a segment, it affects the entire value chain. So I'll leave it at that. So that's where we are, and we hope with the PIA things can look up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Bayode, how do you see Nigeria's natural resource environment today?
Well, I will speak in addition to what Dr. Oni has said. I will speak more to the electricity sector, which again, it's Dr. Oni mentioned about NEPA, which morphed into the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, and then all the privatization came in. Currently, the problems still abound around paying the right price for gas in our power generation sector, especially when you look at the government-owned or government-managed power generation assets, and that's one of the problems we have with power generation in Nigeria. There's a lot of stranded assets in Nigeria. I always tell people that our problem currently is not power generation, for example, but the problem is around all the value chain
ecosystem.
Exactly, around the ecosystem. We have gas on one hand, which where the likes of NDPHC as the gas contracts, and they want to buy gas at a very cheap price, which is not marketable to the gas producers. So, I mean, if you want me to sell gas to you at a price that I can't even produce it, then I'm going to look for a different buyer, right? That's one problem. On the other hand, which is downstream, you have the transmission issue, which we're currently battling with, and we've not even looked at the distribution system right now, and that is another conversation. So that's one thing on the electricity side. Right now, as Dr. Oni mentioned, investors want to see certainty. There's a level of risk that investors can assimilate into their investment portfolio. if they can attain that level of risk, if that level of risk is high, no one is going to come into the system. And that is where we are at this time. Within the electricity sector, we're still seeing high level of losses, technical losses, commercial losses. I think the last report from Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission showed about 42 or 47% loss. There is no system. There is no, imagine you have a business that is losing 47% of its income. It's just not sustainable. And that is the current state of electricity in Nigeria today. And that is something we need to fix. If we can't fix that, we're not going anywhere. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Now, I think just to give us the right context, yes, electricity has so much of intertwining with natural resources. However, we want to focus this webinar or this podcast on the extraction of natural resources in Nigeria. And now we want to move into a new question, which is energy transition. And we all know the whole energy transition objectives of moving everybody away from processes that cause harmfulness to the climate. So when you extract gas, you need to flare it. When you extract gold, you need to blast the sand, you need to blast the rocks. It brings out a lot of pollution. The gold, whatever solid minerals you are mining, you are also going to pollute water in the water stream. So this is the debate now, is the fact that yes, gas is critical to Nigeria's electricity. However, where does Nigeria play its energy transition pathway? Is it to follow what the Europeans have said, that we should all go into solar, wind, and continue to use that to drive our homes and let us stop any form of extractive activities that will pollute the environment? So if Africa has great mineral resources like, gold, diamond, copper, iron ore, and all the likes, for us to extract these natural resources, one or two ways in processes will involve the polluting of the environment. So what are your own views on Nigeria as a country now should take on regarding the energy transition objective or theme? The whole world is waiting on us to make a clear direction on. Over to you, Dr. Oni.
Okay, we have an energy transition program.
Yeah.
410 billion is what government says it needs. I think that energy transition has to be just. Now, recall I said that there is a direct correlation between energy poverty and actual poverty. Now, if you are struggling as a country to be able to find jobs for your people, to be able to industrialize, to be able to have energy to use, to utilize, to take a lot of your people out of poverty, it would then be difficult for you to even be arguing transition or doing it in a way that is not just. Because it's first, for me, in my view, energy addition before you talk about energy transition. You want to be sure that your people can feed before you talk about the generations to come. You want to be sure that your people can live reasonably well before you talk about the future generation. So I think that Nigeria's plan does make sense, because remember, we have a transition fuel, which is natural gas, which isn't as polluting as other fossil fuels. And I also think that from that perspective, part of what government is doing, for example, what the government is looking at a fuel subsidy substitution arrangement where they substitute with gas, CNG, LPG, auto gas. What I think we should do now is to, in the next 10, 20 years, drive gas more than we have oil, or more than we will oil. And to be fair, energy transition is political, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Recall that when the war, Ukraine-Russia war, got to the peak, certain countries started to consider coal. Germany, France, the European Union was considering coal. We're considering nuclear fission. To tell you that anytime there is a problem, energy transition takes the back burner. But they seem to be forcing it on the third world, countries like Nigeria. So we need to also be smart. I think Nigeria needs to have an African strategy, such that whilst the world is moving fast to decarbonize, we too will decarbonize, but we'll do it more slowly. We will exploit and explore our gas resources, even our crude. See, very recently, the British Prime Minister and some parts of Europe started to issue oil and gas licenses for the North Sea. I don't know if you are aware of that.
So I heard about last year. I was shocked. When I heard about it.
Even very recently, that issue came up again. And he said, well, yes, there's energy transition, but we need to be reasonable about it. So we need to be reasonable about it. I don't think we should be pushed. Yes, we should have it in mind, because the Stone Age didn't end because we stopped having stone. So at some point, it'll be clean energy mostly, but I think we should be more strategic about it. We should exploit our gas for several decades to come, whilst thinking about energy transition, so we can transition justly. We can have a gas bus stop, so that gas is our transition fuel. See the challenge with Russian gas. We can be a good substitute if we can work on infrastructure. Let's work on gas infrastructure. Let's look at financing. So in my view, I think we should begin to transit, but we should do it more slowly. We should be more strategic. We should have an African strategy, because a lot of African countries are going to do it more slowly and going to rely on gas. Countries are even energy poor in the first place and have a lot of poverty. See, I understand that in Togo, and this was 15 years ago when I was doing a gas project in Togo, you will find out that they had electricity, but a lot of people were still using coal iron. Why? They couldn't even afford the electricity.
Wow.
So they were using coal ions, not electricity ions, despite the fact that they had almost 24-hour electricity. So the truth is that in transitioning, you have to think it through, and I think Nigeria needs to sit down and have an African strategy and an integrated African energy strategy that integrates other West African countries and other sub-Saharan African countries and maybe Africa as a whole. So yes, we should transit, but there should be justice, and I think it's energy addition first before energy transition. Those are my own views. And actually, the West should also pay a part of this, because the whole of Africa does barely 3% of the emissions. It's Canada, it's the UK, it's the US, it's China that emit the most. So those of us that do 3% should not be forced ahead of those that provide the other 97%. So there has to be justice. There has to be fairness in energy transition. Whilst I think we should transit. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. Bayode. Thank you so much for that. What are your own views on the energy transition and the implications in Nigeria and also Africa generally?
I think Dr. Oni nailed a lot of the points. The first thing I agree with him is, I mean, you can only transit what you have, right? If you don't have, if you're energy poor, you don't have the energy, so what are you transiting? Nothing. So first of all, we need to work on the availability, we need to work on reliability, and we need to work on accessibility. And for that to happen, that means we have to pull our people out of poverty. And now I'm talking about economic poverty, for them to be able to access these things. Because again, one of the problems we're having with the electricity system, where we having a lot of losses, is because a lot of people cannot pay. Just as Dr. Oni said, there's 24-hour electricity in Togo, but people are still using coal iron. That's number one. Number two, let's go into the Nigerian electricity transition plan in the first place. So, good. The plan is looking at the natural gas as a transition fuel, which I think is perfect, which is ideal in the case of Nigeria, because we have a lot of natural gas that has not even been explored. We have, I think, about 200 trillion cubic metric of natural gas that has not been explored. I think the major company that is really doing something great around that is the Nigerian liquefied natural gas company. There's a lot of other companies that are springing up with, I believe, with the support of this PIA that Dr. Oni mentioned. But when we look at the Nigeria energy transition plan, I draw one major conclusion. Number one, and this is my thought, this is my theory, which I'm gonna back up with some points. I feel that the Nigeria energy transition plan is not organic, it's not self-developed, it's kind of influenced by external forces, and the reasons are: number one, when you look at the Nigeria, when you look at the plan, yes, we have the use of natural gas, we have the use of solar PV for power generation. We talk about transition to electric vehicle, even though we've not been able to fix the electricity problem. Then the next was hydrogen. Now, where is wind in the whole of that conversation? It is missing in the ETP. Yes, it's missing. I posed this question on one of the ETP office program one time, that why is it missing? The answer is that, we're looking at the least cost option, which in my opinion, I mean, if we're looking at the least cost, wind is one of the cheapest. When we look at the levelized cost of energy at this point, after solar PV, you're looking at utility scale solar PV, you're looking at wind. So that's one aspect of it. Secondly, I'm a proponent of nuclear energy systems, which I believe is a low, near zero carbon emission energy source. And I don't know why that is missing in our transition plan. I know it's controversial, and I personally believe that's why it's left out of the ETP. Yes, there's concerns about safety and so on and so forth. But when you look at countries like Canada, US, I mean, yes, there are pockets of safety events that happened. But when you still look at the life loss in all those events, it's minimal. I mean, let's look at it. Pakistan has nuclear plants. India has nuclear plants. Egypt is building a nuclear plant. UAE is building nuclear plants. South Africa has one. Why can't it be in our energy mix? And one thing, in addition to that, after we move to hydrogen, which is still an upcoming energy resource, it's still not. It has not reached maturity, which, again, looking into the future, that's a good thing. But in the whole, I think there's a lot of missing pockets in the NEP, ETP. But coming back to the extractive industry, how can we harness our natural resources to gain optimal value from them as through this journey of energy transition? I'm sure that's something we're going to talk about in the course of this conversation, but that is what we should be looking at. We should be looking at the technology, we should be looking at the human capacity, we should be looking at the environment in general. We need to look at security. Thank God, I think the Niger Delta is somehow stable now, unlike 10 years ago when it's more or less a no-go area. But now we're having the same problem in the northeast and the pocket of the northwest, where there's a lot of mining going on, but nobody can go in there until we're getting good news from Osun State with the Segilola program, and now Thor Exploration is going into a lithium program, and also in, I believe, in Oyo State. The mining industry has been very silent for years. So I'll stop at that. But we need to first of all look at the loopholes in the ETP and understand how we can overcome those gaps, to make sure that our transition plan, as Dr. Oni said, is just, is reasonable, and it's localized, looking at our own economic condition, socio-economic condition. That is very important to the whole, to the success of the ETP. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So, just again to Dr. Oni, if we believe that gas is the future fuel for energy transition in Nigeria, for quite a number of years, we've been talking about stopping gas flare commercialization, and the likes. The IOCs themselves, there was a time we even looked at, in-country gas supply, as a regulation, as part of the gas master plan. How can Nigeria, based on the new economy, take on gas commercialization more seriously? Do we have to tie to the IOCs that, they must develop their gas resources? Apart from LNG, which we have seen over the years, we have not seen any major other gas commercialization by the IOCs. What exactly does the PIA provide for? Thank you.
Interesting. That's an interesting question. First thing the PIA does is there's a domestic gas delivery obligation.
Correct.
Each gas producer has an obligation to provide gas for use domestically, and there are a number of provisions, and there are ways you can fulfill that obligation. There are gas-based industries, power, wholesale buyers, and all of that. So that's first thing. But the second thing is you need to work on the commercial arrangement to first even make it attractive. Because if you are forcing people to deliver gas, but the commercial arrangement isn't attractive, then there's a problem. 1. 2, I also think the government needs to do more around developing the infrastructure, gas infrastructure backbone. I always say that it's not the private sector's duty to develop your infrastructure backbone for anything. You develop your infrastructure backbone, private sector is now supposed to connect and expand it.
Correct.
But what we've seen in this part of the world, I can compare with telecoms. You see that we have issues around penetration for internet and all of that, because if anybody's going to do something robust, say for maybe satellite, which and I don't want to advertise, which Musk is doing, you need a lot of money to be able to develop that backbone to then connect, similar to what Main One is done. You get, but so government needs to do more around infrastructure. For a long time, the eastern and western gas pipeline were not integrated. Now there's an integration. Eastern connects to the west, eastern connects to the north. So there's an integration and there are projects like the AKK. So at the moment, to be honest, a lot is being done around gas. There's the Oben 3, there's the AKK gas pipeline. There's and all of them are part of the Trans-Nigerian gas pipeline project. You understand? So they're looking at some point to connect to Algeria, I think, and at some point Morocco. So a lot is going on. But the problem we also have now is when we were very financially buoyant, we didn't do these things. Now to get the financing, see the issues with, I advise them, AKK, so I can't really say some things because I know them, they are privileged information being a solicitor, so I won't go into detail. But everyone knows that it was difficult getting the financing. When we were very rich, there was a time Nigeria had more money than it could spend. Those are the times to have built many of this backbone infrastructure. So government needs to look for the money to build backbone. Government needs to be creative in raising financing. And one thing government has been doing, and even private sector guys have been doing recently, is forward sale arrangements. You pay us to be able to develop that infrastructure. We will pay you from the receivables, from the income, from the cash flow off. So they do a lot of receivables financing, a lot of forward sale arrangements. So financing is important. Green bonds, sukuk, Islamic financing is getting more important. 2, government needs to continue to do more around the backbone. 3, that network code, very crucial. Third-party access. We need to rethink our infrastructure arrangement so that you have the owner does not necessarily be the transporter, so that the owner can be different from the transporter. The transporter can transport for anyone. There's access, third-party access. You understand? You don't select, you don't cherry pick who can use your network. You understand? So we need third-party access. certainty, clarity, which was what the network code does. When you read the network code, you just sign up to it when you have your project, and you're able to then use the NNPC. Is now known as it used to be NGC. It's now NNPC Gas Infrastructure Company, NGIC. Use its infrastructure to do your gas transportation. So that's what I see. Government needs to spend more money around infrastructure, backbone in particular. We need to raise financing. We need to ensure that the commercial arrangement makes sense, or else no one is going to do it, even though the PIA forces them to reserve a particular quantity of gas for domestic use. It's called a domestic gas
obligation,
delivery obligation. Domestic gas delivery used to be DGSO, domestic gas supply obligation. Is now a domestic gas delivery obligation under the PIA, which every gas producer does have. That's why you have the Gas Aggregation Company of Nigeria. It's the one that sort of enforces that thing. It's the middleman that negotiates your gas sale and obligation agreement. So there's a lot going on. The PIA is reasonably good, but I still have challenges around the way the pricing arrangement in the PIA seems to be structured. More needs to be done. There's not a midstream and downstream gas infrastructure fund, for example, and that's gotten from income from sale purchase of gas.
Correct.
Particularly midstream. So a percentage of that goes into that fund. Do
you think the IOCs can do anything, the IOCs themselves, in terms of supporting this backbone infrastructure, since they are more closer to the infrastructure than the Nigerian government?
So you have a point. But the other argument is that they will say we pay our taxes, we pay our royalties. For a long time, taxes were 85.75%, if I'm not mistaken, or 85% rather. And your first 5 years, until you recover your pre-production expenses, it was 55.75%. Or 57.57%, 55.75 or 57 thereabout. Then after that, you graduate to 85%. Yes, you have allowable deductions and all of those, but your taxes were still already high. So they'll tell you, I'm paying royalties, I'm paying education tax, and paying some of them, if you are gas producing, you pay NDDC, that NDDC fee, 4% of your operating budget. If you're already paying that, why should I also be responsible for developing your backbone? Okay, give me tax rebates. So I don't buy that argument that it should be the IOCs. I think it's the government's responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm coming to.
Yes,
that's what
has to give for that.
Yes, there's a road infrastructure tax relief that if you do a government road or something,
which NNPC and Dangote have used. Yeah,
exactly. I think that the IOCs, if they believe the government insists, say, okay, you know what, we need a gas gathering system for these 10 fields. Develop it. We will be removing the money from your taxes, small, because you see the contracting nature of Nigerian. When the Nigerian government gives contract out, I'm not talking NNPC now or anybody. There's always too much inflation. There's always too much of one thing. So if we feel that, you know what, Shell, Chevron, you guys, you believe that you have the expertise, but make sure you use local content to do it. It's local content in itself, but
and they monitor
take ownership of take ownership of it. But you know what? I'm going to build this gas gathering infrastructure. It's $400 million. It's going to be built. I'm going to operate it, and I'm going to transfer it back to government like a BOT basis. And that transfer, government is going to be paying me. I'm going to be deducting from my cash calls or whatever amount. But the devil is in the details. But I just see a bit of maybe possibility there.
Opportunities exist. Yes, brilliant stuff. There are a lot of brilliant minds in Nigeria. I don't know what the problem is. As individuals, we seem to succeed. But as a corporate, we're not making as much success as individuals are making. But we need to be able to channel that. And I think that's where leadership also comes in. But good idea. So much can be done. So many ways to structure stuff.
Yeah.
See the issues around federation accounts, the issue about World Bank negative pledge. That's what led to forward sale arrangement before the PIA. Yeah. And the NNPC became a corporate under the Companies and Health Matters Act. So a lot can be done in Nigeria. Those are my own thoughts. But I don't think we should leave it to the IOCs without an incentive.
Of course, definitely. Yeah. Mr. Bayode, what about you?
So on the infrastructure backbone.
For gas.
Yeah, for gas. I think Dr. Oni nailed it. The backbone infrastructure needs to be there. We've seen the AKK project going on, but it's not supposed to stop at that point. To me, I'm a proponent of centralized systems, What I see when you look at natural gas, methane, propane use for industrial use and domestic use, number one, we see very little of natural gas use in Nigeria in the industrial sector, and that is because the infrastructure is not there. Is it possible for us to develop the natural gas system mirroring the electricity system, where you have a sort of central transportation through major hubs like the AKK, like the Oben 3 that is going on, like the West Africa pipeline, east the Lagos Escavos pipeline, moving bulk products to the west and to the east, to the north, and now have a distribution network in major cities in Nigeria. Because I don't see why every major cities, every state capital of Nigeria should not have at least 12 inches per natural gas pipeline.
Correct, I agree.
I don't see any reason why. Dr. Oni will agree with me. In most houses in Canada, you heat your house with natural gas. My mother-in-law in Russia, she's still, a small village of about 300 people. My grandmother-in-law, she still uses natural gas for her cooking, for everything, even in a small village.
Directly pipe
to her house. Yes, that's the way I expect natural gas to be in Nigeria. And again, with this new electricity act, which now empowers state government and indirectly local government can build a power plant if they want. If they have that gas infrastructure. I was talking to a friend recently in Nigeria. There is this, I'm not gonna put names there. There's this one of the breweries, they're building their own distributed energy resources, because that's what all of them do now. They disconnect from the grid totally, develop their own distributed energy resource, electricity basically. But they only power that with CNG that is transported by trucks. Which, number one, when we look at the safety aspect, especially on our roads, it's a problem. When you look at the cost, it's high. So in my opinion, apart from just the backbone, which it's a precursor to further development, apart from that backbone, we should be able to come to the point of building a distribution network of natural gas, at least to all state capitals. And that is what can rejuvenate some development in a lot of these states. Because when you look at it, when you look at the Nigerian economy, it's domiciled in few cities.
Correct.
Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, maybe Kano, and maybe a little pocket of them in Akwa Ibom, and maybe in the east, say in the center of the east. Just pockets here and there, but we should be able to develop that further, right? We always have state government developing industrial park, but with no real infrastructure.
Correct.
How do you expect people to come, investors to come to these industrial parks to invest, when I know I don't have electricity there, I don't have gas infrastructure to support my activities? Then it's pointless. So my opinion in terms of the natural gas is that we should be able to get to that level. Yes, we need to start it in the right path with building projects like the AKK. We need to do more, which is more like a backbone infrastructure, as Dr. Oni mentioned. But at the same time, we need to start looking at distribution, and that is where the private sector will probably come in. But again, what are the risks? Am I going to get enough gas supply? Is there going to be a fair and equity in the supply of gas to my distribution network, or someone is going to be favored and not? All those frameworks need to be. There must be transparency in the framework. There must be less risk in the framework. I remember when I was working on one of the power projects in Delta State, and we were commissioning power project. For 2 weeks we could not commission that project because the pressure of the gas that is coming in is low, the quality of the gas that is coming is low. So there are a lot of eccentric issues within the system that needs to be addressed. And again, distribution, investment in the system, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we are wrapping up now. Just some, let's say, final words. So the last question basically is to just, we've looked at A, B, and C. The last question is to discuss the ways in which energy transition can aid development of natural resources. Some people talk about what they call critical minerals, like minerals that are critical to creation of wind turbines or power plants, or even minerals that are important for solar panels and things. And in Nigeria today, the European governments, the developed world, they promise a lot of billions of dollars if you have any climate-focused projects. But if you are doing a project that has to do with refinery or gas gathering or gas thing, there are very few investors that will speak to you, because they feel that because their funders are looking for clean energy, climate energy. So the capital raising market in the world is now divided into the guys doing climate related projects and the guys doing energy resource projects. So how, as an entrepreneur developing a gas project, what are your final thoughts, since we've looked at gas is the real energy transition plan, for them to be able to make their project bankable, or to be able to get attraction from maybe these energy transition investors or climate focused investors? Or should they just stick to what the government can do and what their local banks can do? Mr. Oni.
Okay, in my own view, you need to be creative in your financing. You need to show value, because also you need to be able to latch on certain policies of the government, even internationally, because some people have said that at the moment gas is even considered green energy, clean energy. You have to look out for those funds. You have to look out for those institutions that have those policies, and those are the ones you chase. Correct. Now, for the next 10 years, remember, this is the decade of gas for Nigeria. 2021 to 2030 is the decade of gas, if I'm not mistaken. So It means that there are opportunities and there are funds in Nigeria for all of those, for gas projects. So you need to show track record to the extent that you have it. You need to show the value your project will be bringing to the extent that you're bringing value. So you need to look out for, you have to properly structure it. What are the numbers? Use experts too. Use professionals, don't cut corners. If you use professionals that understand financing, use professionals that can draft documents for you, good lawyers, use people that can do the numbers. Start keeping your records even from now. Have a bank account. Set up a proper company. Those are the baseline. And then you now take it further by informing yourself which institutions really give financing for what I want to do. Because there's still quite a number of them. People still do gas projects. There's still a number of them. And now that we're talking about fuel subsidy substitution, government is working on fuel subsidy substitution, CNG, auto gas, stroke, LPG, all of those opportunities exist. Financing is part of the whole package. You understand? I'm advising on something related to that, so I can't go into details, but financing is part of the package. So properly situate yourself in the entire maze so that it's easy for you to be identified. It's easy for you to also identify those areas. I don't think it's necessarily difficult. It's neither plain vanilla nor is it rocket science. It's something in between. You need to be creative also. So you can do forward sale arrangement where you have an arrangement where people buy, but the numbers need to be right. You need to determine whether you take insurance. You need to determine whether you want to have edging products and all of those. So you need to be creative and not necessarily do things the way they've always done. And very importantly, do not take a short-term financing for a long-term or mid-term project. That's one thing that gets people into a lot of problems. Don't go to the deposit money bank to get a 2-year loan for something that should be 7 to 10 years. That's another thing I would advise anyone. Don't be that desperate, or else you'll get into trouble at the end of the day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Bayo, these are your final concluding remarks. So it's basically more like, what do you advise, an entrepreneur developing a mineral resource project, like a gas project, in line of energy transition challenges?
In addition to what Dr. Oni mentioned, I believe number one, we need to look for experts. We need to look into the technical background. One thing I see that is missing within infrastructure projects in Nigeria especially is the technical details are always in the background, whereas it's supposed to go along with project development, financing, legal and compliance framework of the project. And that's one of the things that I'm working on, to get more technical people. And when I say technical people, I mean engineers, a lot of hands-on people that are involved in this project, to start speaking up. Let's get involved in nation development. A lot of engineering professionals, a lot of good engineering professionals in Nigeria. There's a lot of them, especially in the sector that I know very well, in the electricity sector. But a lot of them are not speaking up. A lot of them are not getting involved in these conversations. We need to get involved in these conversations, and that's where the engineering organizations, the Nigerian Society of Engineers, or different Nigeria Institute of Power Engineers, that's where they should come in to be able to support all these infrastructure and engineering project development, to make sure that we can provide our input, as little as it may be, but they are crucial as well in project development phase, and not when the project has been concluded, development has been concluded. Now we're going into execution and construction phase. That's when the engineering folks come in. So I think it's my closing point is to get all stakeholders involved in project.
And just in line with that, I also know that there are also new state-of-the-art equipment, especially in terms of plant selection, equipment selection, which are more energy friendly, which are more environmental friendly. If you don't use the right people to get your OEM equipment, people just sell to you, what they have in stock, and you will find out that there was actually a better version of that equipment, like your clean. If you are doing cement, I've heard that there are new cement cleans now that are very much energy compliant in itself. So in a nutshell, I would like to thank you all for this opportunity to be back on stream, and for us to be able to discuss the issues related to energy transition and the challenge of a natural resource Nigeria. Thank you once again. Please join us for the next episode of our podcast. We will be able to share with you more details around issues related to energy infrastructure and also African development. Thank you once again. I'm your host, Femi Awofala. Thank you.